Fellow Mountaineers, old grads, young lads, and lasses, you made it to another edition of the Trust the Beard podcast. I am your host, The Beard. It is a foggy Monday morning here in the Mountain State. This is September 29th, 2025, about 7:38 a.m. as I'm recording this. Today we are going to review the massacre that was Utah at West Virginia on Saturday at Milan Puskar Stadium. I was in attendance. I did go to the game. I didn't stay for the game. Maybe that makes me a bad fan, but you pay a certain amount of money for a ticket, you expect a product, and when that product doesn't deliver, I find something else to do. And normally I'm not like that, but this is like the annual game where me and a bunch of my college and high school friends get together. There was 8 of us this time. You know, the weather didn't help, being rainy as it was. And so, we're all a little bit older, right? We have kids, we've got jobs, we have responsibilities. And so while we enjoy the time together, we also know that, we can't, we'll say, carry on like we used to, 10, even 20 years ago. And so, it gets late, it gets rainy, we're down 28-0 or whatever it was at halftime. We kind of look at each other and like, oh, let's go get something to eat. And so, just to review this, right, I don't really have any stats. It's just me on my couch talking about my feelings on the game, my feelings on the program, my feelings on what this is for the season, and everything else moving forward. So we'll start with the game. That's pretty bad. That's about as bad as you can get. I think Utah played in almost all phases a near perfect game, it seems like. I heard where their quarterback, Dampier, had a 200 QB rating, I think is what I heard. What do you have, like 2 incompletions the whole game, something like that? I don't know, but just not a good showing from our Mountaineers. And there was always going to be lumps. I think most of us who were realistic about what was going to happen this season with so many new players and the Rich Rod's offense and all that stuff, we knew it would be a struggle. Now, you say that at the beginning of the season, right? Well, we know we're going to take some lumps. It's going to be some hard games, blah, blah, blah. But when you're in the middle of it and you're giving up back-to-back 40-plus points to your opponent and losing by, 30 or so in back-to-back games, that's rough. That's a hard pill to swallow. That's not something you necessarily sign up for as a fan. But I really have to look now at the defense. Like, I knew the offense was going to struggle today. I predicted they would only get 14 points, which is what they got. But I also thought the defense would step up and kind of limit Utah. I thought we would play better at home than we did on the road at Kansas. We're in the familiar confines of Milan Puskar Stadium, right? Teams typically play better at home. That was not the case on Saturday. I put out a meme. I'll put it up here. It's from Scooby-Doo. It's old Fred pulling off the mask of one of the villains. And the original one I have, it says Zach Alley. But when Freddy removes the mask there, it's actually Jordan Leslie, former defensive coordinator under Neil Brown. That's kind of what it felt like. And honestly, it's not a dig on Zach Alley or anything like that. I think Utah is that good, which also leads me to believe that Texas Tech is even better. I just think those are 2 of the best teams in the Big 12. And clearly we know we are not that good, right? I mean, it's not a surprise. I did my review or my preview last week, where I color code all the rankings. And our offense was all blue and purple. That means we are last or second to the last tier in all the categories that I like to rate. And so it's not a surprise. I think we felt maybe Henderson could give us a spark. Clearly that was not the case. His issues are his issues. Now, does that mean he can never perform at a high level this season? No, not necessarily. But if you're going to see that, it might have to wait till I don't know, Colorado, maybe Central Florida. We have a hard slate the rest of the way. It's not going to be easy. It doesn't really get any easier aside from maybe those two games. And those aren't even gimmies either. I think the only one that we are actually going to be favored is probably Colorado at home. And that's the end of October, I believe. And so with that, Henderson didn't live up to what we thought he was going to do. Late Khalil Wilkins came in, provided a spark. And I put another tweet out there, and I'll put it up here. And I said, so now Khalil Wilkins is the golden boy. And West Virginia has had 3 now. And all I mean by that is, all year it was like, this is going to be Nico's team. Nico's earned it. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Nico doesn't really play that well. He had his moment against Pitt, and that's about it. Scotty Fox had his moment against Robert Morris. So at that time, everyone's like, oh, Scotty Fox needs his chance. Well, he got his chance. And what'd he do? He threw 2 straight interceptions against Pitt. Okay, so he's not the answer. All right, well, what about Henderson? We saw what he could do at Texas A&M. He's mobile. He's the spark we need when you don't have an offense. Okay, he gets his turn. He doesn't do that great. Malik Wilkins provided a spark at the end. And I'll go back, and Henderson provided a spark at the end of Kansas. So we're thinking like, oh, okay, he can run this. Not so much. And then again, we go back to Khalil Wilkins. He provided a spark against Utah. I say spark. The game was over, garbage time. But, he got the offense in some rhythm there. And so now it's, Khalil Wilkins is the guy. You can't have 4 go-to guys in one season. And if you have 4 go-to guys in one season, you don't have any. And so the old adage of having, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. That's starting to come to fruition, I think, with WVU. Rodriguez said he's like, I have 4 guys I can win with, or 5 guys, I think he said. He didn't say how much he could win, right? If he was more specific, he might say, I have 4 guys that I can probably win 1 or 2 games with. That might be more accurate. And let me put this out there before I continue on. I am not suddenly anti Rodriguez and anti this system. It is what it is. It sucks. We have 80 new players. We have a hard schedule. We don't have a consistent quarterback. We don't have consistent O-line play. What are you going to do? I mean, this would be any team that had these issues right now. A lot of guys hurt. Not that would make a difference if they were playing. We may see a little bit more. But I'll say this. I think once Jaheim White went out, I think that was kind of, I won't say the beginning of the end or anything like that, but that was a huge step back. Because that is the one guy you knew who was a playmaker, right? Some other guys have kind of stepped up. We obviously know Cam Vaughn. He's a playmaker when we can get him the ball. But Jaheim White was going to be your rock, right? He was going to be the most stable guy on the field, right? He's the one that has shown consistently he can be a playmaker. Now, would he suddenly make all our problems go away? No, but I feel like it really put a hamper on, or it really hampered the progress that our offense was going to have. But here we are. It is what it is. We are a crappy team right now. We are probably going to continue to be a crappy team all season. At this point, I'm not saying these guys can't get better, but I don't think it's not going to be the point where suddenly we're knocking guys over and busting out big runs. I don't think so. I think we kind of are who we are at this point. And that's okay. I mean, it sucks for right now, right? As someone who, if you're a season ticket holder, which I know many people who are, and you have to go to these games and sit through this stuff, it is hard. But it is all for a better purpose, I believe. I hope. I still trust Rodriguez. I think once he's had a year to evaluate what he has, what he needs. He has a year to actually recruit guys and get them interested in WVU football. I think it's a different story. I mean, you got to realize he was hired in, was it January or late December? Late December, I believe. And so in January, you're trying to put your staff together. And while you're trying to put your staff together and trying to fill the void of, however, 70 some guys at the time, right, you don't have the continuity that other programs have at that point, right? They're pretty much established. They already know who they're getting. Most of the guys have probably already signed by the end of December. And so, while they're trying to put pieces of their roster together, some missing pieces, we're trying to fill a whole roster. So we're already behind the 8 ball. And that's just going to be year one. And then you throw in the Rodriguez offense, right? We know he likes to keep it simplified, but it's also complex in how you're supposed to run it, or how you're supposed to, I guess you say prepare for it, get in shape for it, your mentality. Like that's the difference in the Rich Rod offense, not so much the plays or the complexity. It's the foundation and the mindset you have to have when operating this offense. And so it's a lot to take in for all these new rookies, as he always says. And so moving forward, what this game meant to the program, I mean, we're not devastated, I don't think. I mean, fans might be mentally, but, if you knew this was going to be a rough season, then your expectations are exactly where they thought they would be. I mean, can you be disappointed about what you've seen? Can you be disappointed with so many injuries and things like that? Absolutely. Like, nobody likes losing. We're not sitting here and being like, I told you, so it's no big deal. No, it sucks to sit there and watch my team lose. But I'm just speaking to fans that thought, hey, maybe this was going to be 8, 9, 10 win season. I said this last week. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it probably wasn't going to ever be that, ever. And right now it looks like 2 wins might be all we get this season. Now, you never know, right? Injuries happen. That's a big part of the game. Starters go down. Of course, we've seen it at WVU. We never know who may come in here and have to play their backup or a series of backups or, something like that. But, and we're able to pull off the win. Maybe we get everyone healthy at the same time. And you got to realize this, too, as far as scheduling. We've had a pretty brutal schedule. I mean, we're playing 6 games in a row before we even get a bye. Some teams have already had 2 byes. So I think that's a poor job, scheduling for WVU. So, you go on the road to Kansas. They're a tough team. You play Utah at home. They're a tough team. And then you have a short week and go on the road out to Utah to play BYU, who's a tough team. Right? Those are definitely 3 of the probably top 5 teams in the Big 12 right now. And we've played them back to back to back, 2 on the road. So it has been a hard schedule. Everyone has one. I'm not saying that's an excuse. Everyone has a hard schedule, but just this early, it's been pretty brutal. And then with all the injuries that we've had to put up with, and then not getting any kind of break, it's been a hard stretch. So I think the best thing we can hope for at this point is once we get a bye, some guys get healthy. Maybe we find that quarterback that can generate something, and they rep it out in the let's say the off season and the bye week. They get some rhythm, and we kind of start the other half of the schedule just better prepared. I don't know what else to say about it. And I think, and I'm guilty of it too, to a degree, is I think every time we roll out a new quarterback, we all have our fingers crossed that it's like this, it's the new Pat White moment from 2005. And I think fans have to remember that was 5 years in the making, right? That was, you already had a well-established culture. You had pieces around him. You had a good O-line. The culture had already been established well up to that point. And so, and again, like I said, I was guilty of it too. It's like, when does it all just click? I think we're all just waiting. We know this offense can work. We're all just waiting for it to click, and everyone, buys in, or everyone understands what they're supposed to do, and we just start reeling off big chunks. I don't know that's going to happen this year. And so the other thing about it is, if you're waiting on that Pat White moment, you kind of have to have Pat White on the roster. And I'm not saying that any of these guys can't be playmakers like Pat White. They're not going to be Pat White because there's only one Pat White. That's just how that is. And so, can someone perform similar to Pat White? All right, we've seen it with Rich Rod's offense. He does have dynamic quarterbacks that were dominant and playmakers similar to Pat White. Right? You think of was it Denard Robinson from Michigan, Khalil Tate from Arizona, Tyler Huff from Jacksonville State. Now again, I'm not comparing them to Pat White. I'm just saying that they were dynamic playmakers as the quarterback in this offense, like Pat White. And so I think we're just holding our breath and crossing our fingers, hoping that we get that. And like I said, if you're going to have the next Pat White or Khalil Tate or Denard Robinson, they have to be on the roster. And I just don't think that person is on the roster. At least that version of that player is on the roster. And what I mean by that is, could it be Khalil Wilkins? Could it be Scotty Fox Jr.? Yes, at some point. I just don't know right now in their development, are they at that level where they can take over a game like that?
We've had a lot of fun this episode. But you know what's not fun? Not subscribing to the Trust the Beard podcast. Don't pull a Darren DeVries and leave me hanging. Do the right thing. Hit that subscribe button. Like this episode. And share it with every couch-burning buddy in Mountaineer Nation. And make sure to follow me on Facebook, X, and Instagram at Earbeard.
And so they could be another Pat White or, again, a dominant player in this offense similar to Pat White, but they're just not there yet. They're not there in their development. And again, what made Pat White so special is he was a freshman when he did this. So he was, he hit the ground running, midway through the season. Like, he was prepared. I don't know if anyone on the roster is there yet. I mean, if I had to guess, I would say that our future is Scotty Fox. And that's no slight to Khalil Wilkins. The fact that Scotty Fox got the first reps of all these backups, he was the first one out there. He's the one that got thrown in. Future guys, right? Henderson, this is his only season. So he's kind of a one and done here. But of all the young guys that were to come, he was put out there. And I think there's a reason for that, because I think he has the talent to be what we're looking for. He just doesn't have it yet. And he wasn't ready for the moment he was put into. And so you kind of just have to shelf him for a little bit. Let him develop, things like that. But I think he's going to be probably our future. But this season is kind of, it's funny to say it now that we're in a win now mode because those are few and far between at this point. But I think you owe it to the players that you brought in here to try to make the most of this situation, right? And I don't think it's one where you can just say, well, just put all the young guys in and we'll work for next year. There's a lot of seniors on this team, and they came here. Now, they were paid, but they came here to play. And I think if you just make wholesale changes and say, sorry, guys, we're building for the future, you can't play here, I think that's going to sow a lot of discord among the tribe. I know you owe it to fans to just win, but when you're in a mode like this where you're not going to win either way, I think you owe something to the guys that came here to try to play. Now, don't get me wrong, if by putting them out there, you're making the team even worse than they would have been, then you can't do that. But just making wholesale changes to look to next year, I don't know about that. I still think you got to play some of these guys. Now, obviously, the line, I don't know. I don't know what your answer is, because I feel like, again, if the right guys were on the roster, they would have already been out there. You've heard Rodriguez say that, and some of it is just we are what we are right now. And so that's really all I have to say about this. I don't lose hope as a fan. I know it sucks to watch our team just not be able to do anything. But we've been through this before, and I know people don't like to hear that, right? We went with 3-8 the first time Rodriguez was here, and people don't want to hear that. They don't want to sit through it. We were told this was win now. If you've learned anything from college football, especially if I have learned anything, and a lot of fans should probably take this into consideration. What a coach says in the offseason means about how many Big 12 wins we have this so far this year. Right, that's what that amounts to, because coaches are going to say stuff. I think fans seriously take to heart what coaches say in the offseason. And, I've learned over the years that there's a reason why it's called coach speak, because they're just saying nice things about their team. But so, I've learned that when a coach says, I have 5 guys I can win with, yeah, how many games? And I think we take that way too seriously. I think we take it to heart, thinking like, oh, we have 5, Pat White like guys on the team that can lead us to a victory. Like, oh man, we're so deep, we're loaded. Turns out we're not that loaded. Turns out none of these guys can really get this offense going. And it's not all their fault, right? We know that there's issues with the line and things like that. But I think there's issues across the board. The quarterback doesn't have time to throw. Wide receivers can't get open. I know we want to give it to Cam Vaughn all the time, but you can't base an entire offense trying to get it to one guy, right? And we're not getting stuff opened up. People know what we're going to do. We're going to try to run the ball, and they know we can't throw because we don't have an O-line that can block. And so, the formula is out there to how to beat us. It's not hard. And so if you have a half-decent defense, you can probably hold us to, 14 points or less for the most part. I think we've only scored in FBS games, right? We've only scored beyond, 14? 14 is the highest that we've got so far. We scored 31 against Pitt, but it looks like Pitt's terrible. But how bad is Kansas, right? They lost to Cincinnati, or how good is Cincinnati? And so I think that kind of showed me just how we are when I saw Cincinnati upset them. I'm like, but on the bright side, you got to ask yourself, how bad is Pitt? So that can be somewhat comforting to know that your rival is just as bad, if not worse, than you are. So, but don't lose heart, right? This is going to be, you don't want to call it a wasted season. I mean, I understand from a fan perspective, you think because you're not really winning, probably won't go to a bowl, and so you have to wait it out a whole other year. But for the foundation of the program, for what we're installing, for what we're building, it's not a wasted year. It's a year that has to happen, right? You have to go through the growing. And I know Indiana didn't do it. He came right in, yada, yada, yada. Okay, we are not Indiana. So just stop. Just stop with that stuff. We are not Indiana. Their NIL budget was off the charts compared to ours. They were like top 10 in the country. That's why they were so good. They were able to buy some high-end players. Okay? That is the difference. And I know we all want to say, but the rev sharing was supposed to make everything equal. In a way, right? It's supposed to raise everyone's floor, but some teams still have a higher ceiling than others. And West Virginia is one of those others, right? Again, the rev share raised everyone's floor, but a lot of teams have a much higher ceiling. I mean, do you not think that Georgia spends more money than we do on players? Of course they do. So I don't know why it's inconceivable to think that, if another team is top 10 in spending, they're going to be good, right? And that's what Indiana did, and that's why they are good. Now they've had a pretty easy schedule as well. That has helped them, but come playoff time, if they make it, their true colors will show, just like they did last year, right? They're not elite as far as the team, but they have a lot of talent. And I didn't mean to get on a Indiana rant, but I just hear that all the time. It's like, well, Kirk Cignetti, we could have had him, and blah blah blah. Yeah, but we didn't, and this is what we have. So we're just gonna have to deal with it. And yeah, look forward to basketball, I guess, and see what Ross Hodge can do. That'll be fun. And then you got baseball. So we got stuff to occupy us until the next season. But I will continue to support my Mountaineers. I know I left the game early, but it was rainy and boring, and I was hungry. And so where do we go from here? I've kind of touched on it already. I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but I mean, it is what it is. This is just a year that we're going to have to scrap as that rebuilding year and get back to it. And, maybe we find a couple wins here and there. Maybe it does happen. but I don't want fans to expect anything spectacular. Like we're just suddenly going to reel off like 5 straight wins, when we come back from the bye, because we got it all figured out. We still have the same players, right? They can get one day better, 1 week better. It's not going to be like wholesale, like, suddenly our line can just block and everyone's making plays. I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah, just remain faithful, or loyal. I'm not down on the Rodriguez era yet. um, he's still an amazing coach. I think his system works. It just takes time. And I've said this before. I'll close with this. Right, the success he had at Jacksonville State, that does not automatically transfer over to West Virginia. And the reason why, and I've said this a million times, and it's always worth repeating, as I say, when you move up to a higher level, the margin for error becomes much tighter. And I always go back to the Neil Brown era, right? He dominated at Troy. He had a one kind of rebuilding year at Troy, and then he reeled off double-digit wins 3 seasons in a row, and we saw that doesn't transfer. And again, when you're at the G5 level, you can kind of basically it's a lot easier to out-recruit your opponents, right? You get a handful of playmakers, and the margin for error is smaller, and the talent pool is a lot less. So it doesn't take a whole lot to just out-talent your opponent, and you can win games that way. I mean, you even go down to like high school, especially like in West Virginia. You have 2 guys that are like athletes, and you can run the table. You put one at quarterback and one at running back, and then you probably put them at safety on defense, right? You have a good quarterback in high school football, you can go a long way. Now, as you go up the ladder, you need more than that. And so when you're at the Power 4 level, you need a lot more than just a good quarterback, right? Again, the margin for error shrinks. So what worked at the lower level isn't necessarily going to work at the highest level as consistently. It can work, but not as consistently. And so when it comes down to it, you just need more talent. And that's all this is. That's all this is right now, is we just need better talent. And I know that seems so simple, but it really just comes down to that. And so that's where I'm going to close this out. Again, it's a tough pill to swallow. We're going to take our lumps. There's going to be more to come. So just brace yourself for that. There will be more lumps to come. I think the most disappointing part of all of it, though, I would say is, with all the excitement of hiring Rodriguez again and knowing what the offense can be and what the program can get to, it's just like we have to sit through another year of waiting. I think that's the hardest part of all of it, right? We went through 6 years of Neil Brown. We had one good season, a lot of mediocrity, and we got all pumped about Rodriguez, and it's like, oh yeah, we kind of have to sit through this again. It's like for the 7th straight season, and it's a pretty, I don't know what the word I was going to say, not remarkable. It's just been a bad stretch for WVU football for a long time. And I don't know that anyone that's alive today, I don't know that we've ever experienced this long of a drought. I think, I'm trying to think the last time we were actually ranked, not just the AP poll, but like consistently across the board. I'm assuming 2018. So yeah, it's been quite a while since we've been legit relevant in college football. And it's not a fun place to be. It really isn't. And, football is the breadwinner for West Virginia athletics, overall, historically. And so the fact that our breadwinning sport to this university has been, just mediocre for 7 years, it's tough. It really is tough. And so we just have to hope that moving forward, everything starts to click. We get the players that we need in the offseason. Hopefully the NIL stuff increases. We're able to get better talent, recruit a better base, and it goes better for us in the future. But until then, it's going to be a long season. Well, even with one game left, I think we'll still say it's going to be a long season. So we just got to suck it up. I'm still going to watch. I'm still going to root. I may not be as excited as I used to be, but, we'll get it all together. We'll figure it out. We'll be okay. So with that said, I'm going to close this out. I've rambled on long enough. I pretty much haven't said anything for 34 minutes. So I thank you if you held on for this long. But yeah, this will close it out. Again, you can find this on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio. Sorry about that. My wife called. So yeah, basically, I'm just going to close this out and say, don't give up hope on Rodriguez as a whole. I understand this season is probably going to be, for fans, it's going to be a wash, right? It's not what we wanted. It's not what we expected. It's not what we hoped for. But it is laying a foundation for greater things. So while from the fan perspective, the season might be over as far as achieving anything of significance, right? You at least want to get a bowl game. Major strides are taking place to laying the foundation of the kind of mentality and the type of players and the expectations of those players are being forged here. And so that's what's the most important thing. And so with that, I want to appreciate everyone for listening, liking, sharing, subscribing, and everything. I appreciate all that support. I'll come back later this week. We will have the BYU preview. Not looking good again. I think the initial line is BYU is favored by 19.5, I believe, out there. So going to be another rough game probably, but again, we'll break down the numbers. I'll probably try to have that out Wednesday since the game kickoff is Friday, 10:30, I believe, Eastern Standard Time. So until then, we'll talk again. This has been The Beard with the Trust the Beard podcast. Remember, hype fades, stats speak. Goodbye, God bless, go Ears.